In this video I'm going to show you how to make a wide tote bag using the Entwined Quilt Block from Kreative Kiwi. Before we get started, I would like to sincerely apologise for the inconsistency with the lighting, sound and brightness throughout this video. My dear laptop was unfortunately dying on me whilst I was filming this stitch along, and sadly it wasn't obvious for the most part until after it flatlined on me when I was filming and I watched all the clips back. Anyway, I have salvaged things as best I can, but I'm not a wizard when it comes to fixing really technical things like this, so I do hope it doesn't spoil your viewing. You're going to stitch out 9 sashing hoopings. Then you're going to cut them in half to give you 18 segments, and that will give you 3 each for the sides, 3 for the bottom and 9 for the shoulder strap. And you're going to want to do 2 complete quilt blocks and just leave your seam allowance. You're going to use 1 for the front and 1 for the back of your bag. I've cut out all the parts and I will explain what's what in a minute. So let's go over to my cutting table. You need to make 2 of these blocks, 1 for the front of your bag and 1 for the back. Then you're going to decide on how much seam allowance you want. I would suggest about 5/8 of an inch, because then all your seams are going to lie nice and flat without being too bulky once we come to put the bag together. 5/8 of an inch is 16 millimeters. I've cut mine to 15 just because it's a lot easier. Then once you've done that, you're going to take your sashing pieces and join them, and you're going to do them in exactly the same way as you did for the block, by stitching straight down the inside stitch line on each piece. And I've also marked up all the way around on mine as well, because I find it easier that way. If I can take a piece and it doesn't matter which way round it is, it's all marked up. You're going to make 3 of those. You're going to have 2 for the sides and you're going to have 1 for the bottom. Then the rest of your sashing pieces you're going to stitch together to form the shoulder strap. And with 9 hoopings you can use 9 for your sides and bottom and the other 9 for your strap, and it works out a really nice length. If you want to make it longer, of course you can just stitch more sashing and add it on. Once you've created all the bag elements, you're then going to cut out your lining pieces for them. Press your blocks and your fabric, and when you press your blocks it's good to use a pressing cloth so that they're all nice and flat. So once you've done that, you're going to place your part face down on top of, no, let's get it up the right way first. Place your lining fabric face up and place your elements face down on top, pin it in place and then cut them out so that they're exactly the same size as each part. Now with the strap, you're going to pin your backing fabric, again face down, right sides together, all the way along, because what we're going to do is stitch all the way round along that inside stitch line and we're going to leave a gap. Now, where you leave that gap is entirely up to you. You can leave it at the end or you can leave it on the side. I'm going to do it on the side because I think it'd be easier for turning later on, and then we will just close that up afterwards. Next, we're going to start pinning our bag together. You're going to take one of the front or back panel, it doesn't matter which because they're all going to be joined together in a minute. You're going to take your bottom panel, place it face down over the top, and then you're going to line up the seams and pin it in place. So I'm going to start with the corners. Make sure they're seated one on top of the other. Then line up the seams. Then you're going to take the other side of your bag and you're going to pin the other side of the bottom to the bottom of your panel, and exactly the same, start in the corners, do the seams, and then in between. I will check to make sure that these are all lined up correctly off camera before I actually stitch it. And that's the outside of your bag ready to stitch. We'll add the sides afterwards once all the bottoms and front and back have been stitched together. When you stitch the bottom onto your panels, do not go all the way to the end. You want to stop in the very corner stitch of the inside stitch line, because if you don't, you're going to have a lot of trouble when you try and do this seam here and the one going up the other side of the bag. And the same for here. Stop at the very corner here and here. That way you won't run into any trouble. We're going to do exactly the same thing with our lining fabric for the front, back and bottom. So place your fabric face down, line it up and pin it in place. And that's now ready to sew as well. So we're going to go to our sewing machine and stitch the shoulder strap, the front, the back and the bottom together, and then afterwards we'll come back and do the sides. this is the bottom of the outside of the bag. So once you finish stitching the bottom in, you want to press these seams apart on both the outside of your bag and your lining. Move that out the way for a minute. We're now going to place our sides. You're going to place your sides level with the top, one on each side. Let's turn it over the right way first. We're going to do the same with this. It doesn't matter which side you pick, as long as you pick one. So this time you want to be a little bit more careful. Actually, I'm going to put this on the side, easier to see, because you want to marry up all the seams. And don't forget to do your corners as well. Do the same with this side. When you do your side panels, stitch all the way down, but make sure that you stop at the bottom seam here. Don't go past it, otherwise you're going to have a hard time when you come to do this seam here and here. Leaving this up means that you can pivot your fabric round and still keep it flat. The same applies for your lining as well. This is the sides on the outside of the bag. these are the lining sides. So next we're going to do this seam here and this one here. So what we're going to do is right sides together as always. Swing that back round. And pin. That's going to give you a really neat corner. Let's do the same this side, so I'm just going to swing that back and open the seam out. And pin it. And then we're going to stitch from this point here to here on both sides. And we're not going to go past this loose piece of seam there. And we can prep this in exactly the same way. Match up the seams. And then we're going to stitch down here till we arrive at the corner there. Let's do the same for this side. So fold that back. And we're going to stitch from this point here along to this point here. Now we're going to do the same with the lining. So now that the bottom of our bag on both segments, on both the lining and the outside, are stitched up, it kind of resembles a pizza box without the front. So what we're going to do next is join the sides in exactly the same way as we did these. We're going to pin them and then stitch them, and you're going to stitch them down to the corner here where you drew your guidelines in. You don't want to go beyond that because we want our seams to lay flat when we come to put it all together. So once you've pinned it, I've already done the lining, it will look like that. So let's get on and pin this, and you want to make sure that, again, all your joints are lined up, and I will double check these off camera after I finish pinning because I can't always see what I'm doing. And just match up the 2 corner stitches on each piece. You can use clips for this if you prefer, it's entirely up to you. And I'm going to do the same with this side. Once more, the top 2 corner stitches. And we're now ready to sew along our guideline. When you stitch your seam on the open edge of your bag, so the top edge of your bag, you're going to start on the top edge. And I'm going to stop at the seam on the bottom of the bag. Now for the other side. And I'm going to start at the seam on the bottom of the bag. And because this is the top edge, we're going to stitch to the very end. We're going to do exactly the same on the outside of the bag. So I'm starting with my top edge, so I'm starting on the very edge of the top and just following my drawn in guideline all the way down. Just make sure that all your seams on the back are flat and outwards, pressed outwards. And again, I'm going to stop at the seam on the bottom of the bag. this time I'm starting at the bottom of the bag, and I'm going to start on the stitch line of the bottom. Now that the bag construction's finished, you should have 3 pieces: the strap, the lining, and the outside of the bag. I'm just going to put these 2 pieces aside for the minute, and we're going to sort our strap out. Okay, so first things first, we're going to cut across the diagonal of our corners so that we take all the bulk out of them. Just be careful not to cut any of your stitches, otherwise you're going to have to stitch it up again. Then you're going to turn it, through the gap that we left previously here. It might be a little bit fiddly, but perseverance will win. And of course, because I'm doing this on camera, it's going to look 10 times harder than if I were doing it off. Like I say, it's not usually this difficult. If you wanted to do an unquilted strap, of course you could. I think the quilting, although it makes it harder to turn, will give a beautiful finish. Okay, I'm going to finish this off camera and then we'll deal with the corners. So once you've turned your work out the right way, you want to push your corners out from inside just so that they lay flat. Don't make too big a deal out of them because they're not going to be seen. And then you're going to close up your turning gap. And I'm going to hand stitch that. I'm just going to do an invisible ladder stitch to close it. So I've stitched most of the join up. Okay, just to show you what I'm doing, just take your needle, push it through the 2 edges. Just take a little fine amount and then pull it through, and then do exactly the same going back the other way. Just do it in small stitches, and as you pull it, it will close the gap. I'm just using the same embroidery thread that matches my fabric. Do a couple of stitches back and forth and then pull. It doesn't really matter. Oops. I've now lost my needle. Okay, sorry about that. It gives like a ladder effect. I'll pull it apart in a minute so that you can see. I'll tie it off. So if I pull on that seam, oh, it's not going to pull apart. Loosen a couple of the stitches. You can see there that it just zigzags back and forward. Pull it tight to close it, and then just tie off. I just do 2 knots, and then I bury the end inside. Just push your needle in, make sure it's between the 2 pieces of fabric, and then pull it out anywhere like that. Then pull it tight, snip it off, and your end is now invisible as well. So once you've done that, you're now going to give this one final pressing along with your lining and your outer bag. Make sure that all the seams are pressed apart, because when we put the 2 together, it will reduce any bulk that we've got. The next step is to attach the straps to the top of the sides here. So I'm going to turn this around. Now that you can turn this out the right way and do it, or you can leave it out the wrong way. It doesn't really matter, as long as you get the strap in the right place and your seams laying flat, which is why it's important to press all your seams open before you go to this step. Also remember that once we add the lining, you can't make any corrections without a lot of hard work. So make sure that you're happy with everything before you add the strap. So there's my strap. Don't do what I do and put a line on it. I shouldn't have done that. What you're going to do is just fold this end back, and we're going to place the quilted side of the strap to the quilted side of the side, line it up, making sure that all the seams on the back, these ones here, are laying flat, because that will keep the bulk out of the edges, and then pin it in place. Then we're going to do the same with the other side. Just make sure, I'll just organise this a little bit better. Okay, you're going to make sure that there's no twist in your strap. Pop it inside and then pin the edge. And you can put edge to edge with yours if you haven't done a line like I stupidly did. Okay, never mind. We'll work around it. I'll trim it off. So then we will pin that. Same this side. And then just double check that the quilting runs in the on the outside when you pull it back, which that does. So we can now stitch this in place, and all we're going to do is go, oops, sorry, seam to seam straight across. And we're going to do that on both sides. That way we don't have to worry about the straps being in the right position once we come to add the lining. And it's a very, very simple bag. I make it look 10 times harder than it really is, but that's because I can't see what I'm doing most of the time. So we're now going to stitch these on, and then we will deal with the lining and finish our bag. And of course you might want to use a more neutral thread colour. I'm just using red so that you can see what I'm doing. So I'm just starting on the very edge of the stitch line so that I can hold these seams back. So now that that's done, we can turn it out the right way just to give it a final check before we go any further. And our handle is now secure. Strap, sorry. And that one. And just make sure that you haven't accidentally stitched a twist into it. This is absolutely fine. And we can now turn it inside out again. Before we go any further, we've got a little bit more prep work to do in the bottom corners of your bag. And what you need to do just to remove some of the bulk is just to cut the each piece of the seam to a 45-degree angle without cutting the stitches in the corner here. It's just to remove some of the bulk so that when we put the two pieces together, they sit nicely. So I'll show you how I do this. So I'm just going to move that out of the way, lay that flat like that, and cut like that. Then I'm going to do the same with this one. Let's get that in position so you can see what I'm doing. It takes 2 minutes, but it makes your corners really nice. That's that one. Now let's do this one. at 45 degrees there, thereabouts. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's literally just to take the bulk out the seams. So just make sure that you don't cut anything under here that you shouldn't, because otherwise you're going to have to redo your lining. And of course, don't cut any stitches in the corners either. Nicely reduced, so we can now do the same with the outside of the bag. It doesn't have to be pretty because it's not going to be seen, but it will help you have really nice corners. That's those done. And we're going to do the same with these corners. So that's how it should look once it's all trimmed away. We're going to do the same in the other corner. Before I go any further, I'm just going to trim this handle level with the top of the fabric there so that it's easy to put the lining up. It should have been level, but I wrote on it and it would have shown. So I'm just going to trim that off. When you make your handles, if you don't want to sew the ends up, you don't have to, because everything's going to be hidden. Okay, so now we come to adding our lining, and we're going to keep the outside of the bag inside out. And your lining, you're going to turn it out the right way. And just poke your corners out so that they sit nicely. And they should poke out quite easily now that you've removed all the excess bulk in those corners. Then put it inside your bag. Now with the strap, I've just put a pin each side so that that stays nice and straight when we stitch around the edge. So place your fabric inside, your lining inside, sorry, and you want to match up these edges, these sides, sorry, so that the seams match. You also want them so that they're pressed back, because that again will remove the bulk. And it doesn't matter which side you stitch, so I'm going to probably follow this stitch line here as it's nice and highly visible. And then I'm going to pin that in place. Same with the other seam. I'm just putting 2 pins in just to make sure that those seam allowances are nice and flat. Okay, so let's do the other side. The only thing that's important is that your 2 seams on the side here completely line up. If they do, everything else will. And you can pull the edge of your strap out of the way. Okay, so now we can push this in roughly in place. I'm not too worried about the bottom there. All we're concerned about is the top. And then we're going to pin the rest of it. Again, making sure that these seam allowances are laying flat. Now we're going to do the other side. Now what you do need to do, that's most important, is to leave a gap so that you can turn this out the right way, exactly the same way as we did with the strap. So I'm going to do mine in the middle. And you need to leave at least a hand's width, which you will sew up afterwards. Now, what you could have done if you wanted is to turn your bag out the right way, the lining included, and then put the lining inside and then added a bias binding around the top. But how you do it is entirely up to you. It's your bag, your project, you do you. Put double pins where my gap is as a reminder not to stitch it shut. The other thing to do is make sure that you've removed all your labelling of your segments so that they're not trapped forever inside. I've already done that, both back and front to mine. And now all we're going to do is start here and follow the red line all the way around till we get back to about here. And if you back tack a few times here, so that when you're pulling it through, it's not going to rip apart. That way it's a little bit stronger. Okay, so that's ready to sew. And of course you will also be using a colour that's going to completely blend in with your fabric. I'm using red so that you can see what I'm doing. We're just going to follow the inside stitch line of each of our segments of the block. Little note, if you've got a stitch line here like you have on the sides, just stitch this side of it so that it will be hidden by the stitching that you're doing. And we're coming to the end where we need to leave our gap. So I'm just going to stitch to the seam here and then stop. And I've back tacked a few times just so that the edge of the gap is nice and strong. So before you go any further, you're going to press all these seams nice and flat. So I'm going to go and do that, and then I'll be back and return the bag. Now we're going to turn everything out the right way. So you're going to pull everything through this gap. And you want to grab the outside of the bag. Don't worry about the inside, the lining. Just be careful not to rip anything. So that's now turned. Let's pull these corners out properly. Just put your hand inside. Because it's the last opportunity you're going to have to make sure that they're pushed out correctly. That's the other corner. And because you've removed all the bulk, they're going to sit nice and clean. So then you're going to poke your lining inside. Push the corners down into the bottom of your bag. Two arms in there. Okay. Then we're going to press this top edge now. And because we've already pressed it once, it will sit really nice and flat. And you can press your gap as well, so that when you come to stitch it up, it's not going to, it's going to lay nice and flat, sorry. Okay, so I'm going to go and press that next. So I've pressed all my edges nice and flat. And all that remains is to stitch up this gap and then do a line of top stitching all the way round. So I'm going to stitch this up the same as I did the strap with a little ladder stitch. And then I'll be back and we can do the top stitching around the edge. I've loaded my thread that matches the lining onto my bobbin. And for my top thread, I'm using a clear monofilament, and that's going to match the quilting. So next we're going to stitch all the way around using the side of our foot as our guide. And that's our bag finished. I hope you enjoyed this stitch along. If you did, please give me a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe to be notified of new videos as soon as they're published. Do pop along to Kreative Kiwi's Facebook group. There's always lots of ideas, help and inspiration there for everybody. And thank you very much for joining me. You'll find a link to this design in the video description below, along with lots of other information such as where I get my supplies and some discount codes for you as well. Take care, and I hope you'll join me next time.